Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lucid, and I am joined once again by Sai, my co-caster.
Hi, I'm Sai, his co-caster.
That's right. So Sai, I know you had a bit of an addendum, a disclaimer, a mild restatement or retraction you wanted to issue before we start this one.
Oh, yeah. So I think that I was unnecessarily harsh on Miklin's build because I was kind of ragging on that one multiple times, saying how I hated it and it's awful. And it's really not that bad. However, I do think that it's missing some of the value that you get out of playing Miklin as a nation that can control its dominion. And that if you do want to play Miklin as a nation that's just automatically always wanting to spread its dom, then its scales are still somewhat imbalanced for that. And I don't think that Mictlan has to be played as a Turbo Blast nation. It is possible to play it as a nation that just has these incredibly efficient Blood 1 mages and actually pretty decent mobile nature astrocasters.
Yeah.
So like it is a nation that can be played off of its magic. It can be played with more of a scales focus. But I think that for that focus, it kind of misses the scales. So between that and between the units that they were recruiting for their early game expansion, I was just a little overly annoyed with what I saw as misusing one of my favorite nations. That said, the build is fine. Its bless is very functional,
Yeah, I was expecting to
and
go
it's
see
definitely
like another charged body or something from last year because I hadn't seen it yet. And after that we recorded, I went and looked at it, and I was like, "Oh, it's kind of normal. Like
yeah,
it's not really that
it
weird."
is yeah, it is very much a normal stats resist bless, and I do think that in LA, an imprisoned stats resist build that focuses heavily on strength can absolutely do very well.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the message from Micklin. We had an entire build order and expansion plan written up pregame, already messed it up. Oops. Behold our bless. Does that mean they recruited the wrong thing? I don't know. They haven't expanded. So this is the first time of expansion. And to give you guys like a bit of a heads up, we're going to be going through these. This is the first time we're going to get to see a lot of the blesses. So we'll take this time to kind of comment on that. Last episodes, we talked more
Except for
about
me because I
the
peeked ahead.
right. We talked more about the nations though still. So this time it will be more about the builds and then the expansion. So yeah, and then we'll look at a message from Ulm. Glad to be returning as a finalist this year. It's pretty rare company. Squeako holds the crown in the lobby though. I believe he's now a 3-time qualifier. Congrats to Squeako. That's pretty tough to do. With great name recognition comes great Diplo challenges. The qualifiers plus finals circuit can be pretty exhausting, especially if you play for the late game as I tend to. With that in mind, Braxa is going to be doing the heavy lifting for Ulm in our Hydra. Brax, you the man. We are a good combo of contrasts and similarities. This build definitely has Brax's fingerprints on it. If you're familiar with horse racing, Brax is a horse that likes to run fast, to run at the front. Will not spoil it for anyone. It's funny they have the horse analogy because they have a wild bless, which we commented on, but I don't think we said what it was last time. So, okay.
Yeah, so in the finals, Braxo did actually sub like fully for Gicello for I think just one turn, might have been two. And during that time, that was I think the only time I actually talked to him during the game. He I don't know if he had like been like just only loosely paying attention as like a Hydra partner, but he like fully didn't seem to really get what was going on in the late game turn that he was subbed in for.
Oh,
That said, this bless is amazing, and if this is Braxo's handiwork, then very, very impressed with the man.
except for the Stygian skin, which we'll talk about in a minute. The decay
Oh yeah,
weapons.
a little bit of a
Yeah.
miss with the mark there, but
Yeah.
overall still very, very impressive bless.
All right. Oh, 97 shows free from enemy military units, so we suspect cloud mages. Sigh. From Joman, much rejoice. Diplomatic contact has been made with Atlantis to my left, and we have a common agreement to not mess with each other's waters. Well, that's very good for Joman. Also, didn't notice the heavy cav mercs last turn, as I don't really have a good way to spend my gold. These early turns, I'm putting 545 on the horsemen. Really hope that will be enough. These horsemen will be able to turbo boost my expansion if I get them. 545 might be a bit much, but rather safe than to skip a turn. Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely a bit much. I don't imagine that anyone's betting anywhere near that much on winning that bid. As you pointed out, the water provincing certainly benefits Joman over Atlantis. But if you look at the map,
Yeah.
Joman's water provinces are a little bit out of the way.
Right.
So Atlantis would have to actually like
I mean, he
go
could sail
past,
here and then come hit it. So he can get there very quickly, but
You'd have
he'd have to
to
go in the
like
cap
be
circle.
intentionally Yeah, he would have to intentionally be screwing with Joman in
Right.
order to get into Joman's
Right.
lake.
And kind of some of the thought behind the layout of this map. So we put Atlantis in the middle because they're probably the nation most able to take the heat if all these guys decide to 3v1 him. And while he can, while he can go and probably mess with a bunch of these people, he's probably just as worried about being 3v1'd. So you can see that's probably why he made nice with Joman. Not because he's scared, not because he doesn't think he could get underwater in the Joman lakes, not because he doesn't want to. It's probably just because he's trying to dodge a 3v1, is my guess.
I was not aware that that was why you set it up that way. I had just been looking at the sailing implications of their setup
Yeah.
rather
Well,
than
I was
the
thinking, like, if we put
diplomatic
Joman
thing.
in the
Yeah.
middle, like the chance of Joman controlling their lake would be 0. I think, it'd be like, people would be like, oh, like Arethia would be like, oh, let's
Yeah.
come get in there. Or Atlantis would be like, oh, let's get in there. Same thing. I mean, Marignon, it's actually 0.
Mm.
Arethia might be able to control it, but it'd be tricky.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I definitely see more of a potential contest between Atlantis and Arethia than any of the other nations there.
Okay. Message from Gat. So it's turn 2, and all starting locations are already known. I'm amazed. Yeah, that's wild.
Can't they just open up the map file?
So that's a good thing to talk about. If they got a special nation dependent start, so if they're a coastal nation, and I believe like Zabalba wanted a cave start, and I think Agartha wanted a cave start, then those nations are hard coded into the map. But everybody with a normal plain start is random. So what that means is last turn they all moved to scout, and in LA you can see like 3 provinces
Right.
away.
3 provinces.
So they've all talked enough so that the people moving a scout have located the position collectively of all the plains nations, which is nuts. So,
Yeah, I guess that's LA for you.
and I was also careful. I didn't upload the map into onto the bot until like 15 minutes before the game started. So nobody knows, that's one of the things, like if you have a map with fixed starts, if people get it ahead of time, they can know their neighbors and then plan their bless for that, which I didn't want to be the case. All right, from Gath.
For certain, yeah. It looks like most of the bless heavy nations don't have that fixed neighbor thing going for them, though.
Right.
It's really just that little water corner.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. So it's turn 2, and all the starting locations are already known. Looking at our neighbors, we have rough terrain between us and Utgard, so hopefully that side will be peaceful. Joman has a cluster of water around them that is almost a pond, and they will likely be involved in a war with Atlantis one way or the other. Agreed favorable borders with them, and even made a non-aggression pact. He's just such a... They literally haven't made that. It's so crazy. Like, nobody's expanded yet, and they made a non-aggression pact and a border. There's benefits to that, which I think are somewhat obvious, right? Like if you have a secured border, you can both expand in other directions and then come back and backfill that border later.
Yeah.
It's a kind of shitty thing to do in a mixed skill game. If you know you're going to be expanding really well, you may not want to do it, but
Yeah, it's definitely not this kind of thing that I'm fond of, but, it's also interesting that he's describing his build as a scales drain gath, and with that description, I think it makes sense.
yeah.
Like, I think his bless is still a little small. His scales may be a little unnecessary. Like, you don't need production 3 to max your Levites and so on.
Right.
But, if scales is what he definitely has them.
Marignon is a common rush target, but not a very good matchup for us. Mictlan has growth 3 and high dom score. He's obviously aiming for late mid-game. Also, he has an incredibly rich start with a large freshwater farm between us. Still too early to decide anything, but we'll prioritize getting crossbows even more now. Maybe the slingers later. Yeah, the slingers can be really good against Mictlan, especially if he's going Jaguars.
Yeah, and slingers are good if you have good buffs for them, because they have 6 attacks to a square. But they also don't have like superhuman combat stats or great armor.
Right.
So they're kind of like a glass cannon unit. And even then, they're only a cannon if you can actually buff their strength.
Right. And I don't know if Mictlan went 10 fire resistance. He probably did. But if he only went 5, flaming arrows could be a big problem if he makes a ton of slingers too.
I mean, really, the slingers are functionally just multi-attack units. Like, they do have slings, but that's not their job.
Oh, okay.
Like, given that
Let's
this
take a
nation
look at
also
them.
has crossbows, like if you actually do want the ranged option, it's the crossbows that really matter. The special thing about the slingers is really just the fact that they have 2 swords.
Okay. I thought you were saying something about the ammo. Oh yeah, they do have 2 swords. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean the swords are going to be pretty good against low protection units too. They don't hit hard, but they hit a lot.
Right, that's what I was saying,
Yeah.
that they're like kind of glass cannons, but only really cannons when you can start buffing their
Wait,
strength,
who are their
because that's going to
crossbows?
seriously improve their damage. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant like the indie crossbows that he was
Oh,
talking
okay.
about.
Okay.
Because this is the LA, so like you
Right.
basically always have
Right.
crossbows regardless of what your nation is.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it. Let's start. We'll start with Mictlan. All right. So Mictlan with a kind of weird, it looks like he just put these guys in the same line formation, or maybe how do you get this lineup? Was this 2 squads and he put these guys in the middle and then they push to the outside?
I'm honestly thinking that this is just, oh, yep, nope, those are separate squads. Or no, I actually don't know. I would guess that they're separate squads just because of the fact that the slingers were firing first.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this build isn't bad, right? Like it does have, heavy resist, like stat resist focus. It does have a heavy prioritization on the strength. So in that sense, like it is like taking the things that Mictlan wants in its build. My problem with the build is more specifically focused on the scales, which we can get to if you want to
Yeah.
like just go take a look at their cap.
That's
But then
problem.
the affliction resistance is also something that's specifically for the Jaguar warriors. But given that they have Undying, it's also a little bit of there because if they go, well, sort of. So if they go to negative in their human form, then they go into the Were Jaguar form and are fine. So like basically they can get extra afflictions based on the fact that like, they're taking damage with relatively low starting hit points in their first form. And then, when they switch forms, then they're fine. So the Undying is essentially like actual hit points. And the affliction resistance kind of helps balance that out. That like the
Right.
real risk of doing that is getting afflicted.
Because and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the ways that the affliction mechanic works is the bigger the damage you take relative to your hit points is basically how likely you are to
Exactly.
get afflictions. And I don't believe it considers Undying when it's looking at your hit point
Correct.
pool. So if you take a like huge amount of Undying, you kind of get afflicted to hell. And
Yes.
10
So they're
Undying is a
basically
lot
using
because it's going
Undying
to
as
apply twice. It applies to each form. So 10 Undying is actually 20 bonus hit points per Jaguar.
right. And that first set of 10 is what the affliction resistance actually helps with. Because, obviously that second set is just like they're dead anyways after the battle.
Right. Yeah. With the, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
If you click on their cap, though, I kind of want to talk
Yeah.
about the scales a little bit just to say what I'm talking about. Okay. So the way that I see scales spreading as being valuable for Mictlan is that because you can control your scales, you can kind of choose how your empire is set up. So like I mentioned in the last video, my preference is just fully dump scales, much bigger Hellbless. Same idea that these guys have where you just go very stats heavy, but you just stack on even more in order to make your units even better and so on. But if you are choosing to spread your scales, it's completely okay to play Mictlan that way. You can choose to play as even, I would say, a scales Mictlan build. But if you are going for that type of scales build, it's very valuable to get magic. And the reason for that is, first of all, you have very low base researchers in your Blood 1 like mage priests. Those guys have only 7 base RP, and they're your workhorse mage and your blood hunter. So you're always going to be recruiting a lot of those guys, and they're going to be spending a lot of time reading books. So having magic scales is just really valuable. Just in terms of like how much like
Well, you can see
extra
they
RP you get.
wanted magic scales, right? Like they didn't go drain. They wanted it.
Right.
Basically, they dumped all their scales except they
But
didn't fully dump magic and they didn't fully dump order. And not fully
and they
dumping
didn't
order.
take death. Yeah.
Yeah, or they didn't take death, right? Not fully
Yeah,
dumping
so
order kind of makes sense, right? Like that they
kind of.
need.
So here's
how many. I'm guessing you could max out Jaguar production at like 7 Jaguars in forts with this.
that. Yeah, you definitely can't get 10. I don't even know if you can get 7. Jaguar warriors actually do have a very high rec point
Right.
cost. I'd prefer to expand with eagles, which makes
The math
the
different.
disorder or but
Right.
I can definitely see why you don't fully dump that. But I do think that they should have taken death. And the reason for that is that if you're even if you're doing a build where you're like, spreading scales from your cap and so on, then when you take enemy territory, it's going to take a while to transition over to your scales. So from an income perspective, it's actually not as bad as it looks because
Right.
you can like slow down how quickly those death scales actually spread. So even though, you are eventually going to want your scales in,
Right.
various places throughout your thing, with death, it's not as full of an impact as it is on a nation that is always spreading their scales without being able to control it. And along the same lines, magic is such high value because of the low base RP of your research that it more than makes up for that gold differential.
Well, they got Magic
The
3.
other
They
thing,
just didn't get Magic 6 is one way to look at it. You know, like when I say that, I mean like, they could have gone Drain 3. So they were like, they've written some of these scales like halfway. It's like, I want it, but I can't afford to go like to really buy the full thing. I'm just gonna not dump these ones.
yeah, I do think that
Yeah.
like if you value magic, then you should take magic, and if you don't, then take Drain 3 and like live with that decision.
I mean,
And then
I
the
don't
other
think
thing
it's
is
binary
that
like that. I don't think you have to go Magic 3 or Drain 3 because you get like you get diminishing returns on the research value the higher up you go, and you get increasing return or like penalties the farther you go. Like if you're a 5 research mage, like if you're Airmore, right, and you're dumping Drain, like indies that you're gonna buy literally will research for like 1 RP or 2 RP, right? Like in each of those Drain scales, if your main research core is indies, is like enormous, right? So anyway,
well,
like I think there is a place for like a middle of the road build. I agree with you. Like Magic would be great, but
yeah, I just think they should take death. Like if they want to be researching in their dominion,
Yeah.
which again is not something they have to do because they're Mictlan, then they should be taking
Yeah.
death magic.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to research in their dominion, which is the way that I would prefer to do it, then you want Drain 3
Right.
because you're just moving. You're going to move your mages to somewhere
what I'd
that
say is
doesn't have that
Death
anyways.
3 Magic 3 build is going to be a faster build. You're gonna have
And
you're
then,
gonna have
yeah, the other-
faster timings on things, and but
it also
late
gives you a
game-
really cool event pool.
yeah.
But yeah, and then
One
so
thing I want to add
just
here,
to-
Sai, is I talked with Zan a little bit before the game. I think I can't remember what it was. Maybe we were talking about like Advanced Fancy Dance or something, which was like a game on the on my server. But basically, Mictlan can afford its cap circle like a pop kill because they need so few resources. And
they don't need any resources.
right,
Yeah.
and Mictlan, every single game I've ever seen, I haven't really ever seen Mictlan fort their cap circle. But I was watching Advanced Fancy Dance. Squeako, who's in this, Squeako's playing Utgard. He was Mictlan in that game, and he got like 5v1'd early. Like in the first battle was an all-in from Gath, which was being played by Arco. And Arco literally said everything he had. Squeako managed to kill it, but then all the rest of his neighbors killed him. Short story, Late Age Mictlan tends to have very fucking bad diplomacy, right? And
I honestly think there's a good reason for that, in that it's one of, if not the best scaling nations in the era, and people perceive it to have an early game vulnerability, which it does have if it doesn't spam Eagle Warriors.
well, maybe. I think the plan here, this is what I'm speculating. The plan is to fort the cap circle, and because the forts are next to each other, it's going to be, first of all, it's going to be very easy to consolidate armies. Like if you spread your forts out, doing Jaguar logistics can be pretty tough. But here you're basically going to have one mega fort that's making like 40 Jags a turn or something. I think that's what he's trying to do. But we'll see.
Yeah. So I think that if you are concerned about early game diplomacy, that you want to go full Hellblast because it's just stronger.
Yeah.
And if you're not concerned about, early game diplomacy, then you can do something. So I guess just to give a little more context, Fulik actually played a Scales Mictlan build
Yeah.
and destroyed me with it.
Nice.
It was a late game thing where we actually fought because like we had fought completely different wars early on. But he ran, I think, like Luck 3, Magic 3.
Okay.
I think he did run Turmoil though.
Right.
But he ran a build that was like very much focused about using their very good blood sacking to actually intentionally spread your dominion. And it was much more focused on using their mages. And, of course, you do have the Ocelotl Hammer,
Right.
and that does carry. But like that was very much a smaller focus on just like a Hellbless, and more of a focus on just, these mages are actually really
Right.
good.
Yeah, and I know that's
and if
also
you're
something
fighting in
they're
your
thinking,
dominion.
too. They're thinking, like I've
Yeah.
heard Zan rattle on about the mages. But anyway, let's keep moving. We've talked a
Yeah.
lot about
It,
Mictlan now.
it,
Any closing thoughts,
yeah.
Simon Mictlan?
Yeah, the magic does make a big difference in terms of spell casting for blood magic in particular, because their spells tend to have 100 plus fatigue costs.
Right.
So in battle magic, it makes an even larger difference than it, or it's another thing to consider.
Right.
So even though the research is already a big factor, there's like yet more benefits to going for that scale.
Yeah, Drain 3 can be really tough on Blood Nations if you actually want to use Sabbaths and stuff, especially if
Yeah,
you're primarily Blood 1, because that means you're going to like actually be passed out after you cast your first spell.
right. So when I run that build, it's with the thought that I'm not fighting in my Dominion anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are spreading your Dominion, or in this case, looking at a defensive build, like if you're suggesting that their plan is to be fighting just like around their cap
Yeah.
circle, which not a plan I like, but understandable from like a very like defensive minded player's perspective, then you really do want to focus on that magic scale because it's going to affect your spell casting so much.
Well, I don't think that necessarily means they're going to be fighting around their cap circle. I think because what happened in the Advanced Fancy Dance game was Mictlan had like a fort over here, you get like a good farm, and then he like got this nice province over here, and then he put a fort up in this farm he got because he had like kind of good expansion. And then when all his neighbors turned on him, like he didn't like this fort wasn't making enough power to project and control this war with Gath, right? And so, like, to focus on enemies, he ends up having to like fully sacrifice all of his like 2 of his forts. If he's like, okay, well, I can't deal with Gath, everybody right now at the same time. I'll focus these 2. Well, that means sacrificing forts. When they're all in the middle, you can still fight wars out here, but it means you're not going to be sacrificing your forts when you get like 4v1'd. But
yeah, that makes sense. Although in this case, you do still want to fort those farms just because they give so many more rec points.
yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ, look at this one. This is like a cap. Oh, he's
Yeah,
beelining towards it too.
Someone else had actually pointed out that farm because it's a freshwater farm.
Right. Yeah, if it's got a river near it, I think it's freshwater. I don't remember if it gives you freshwater being near a lake, but
So freshwater is just a map tag. Like it's actually not related to like the actual artwork.
I
As
thought
far as
Map
Map
Nuke
Nuke
does it like that.
I
though.
think yes,
Yeah.
I was going to say that. Like Map Nuke's generation, it does let you click that tag,
Right.
but I think that you're right that it does automatically apply it to provinces bordering a
Right.
river. But theoretically, like on a mechanical level, it's just like it's a thing in the
Right.
code.
And I think it's like a 10% pop boost or something like that. Okay,
Yeah, I don't remember the numbers, but it's definitely a pop boost.
Gath. We see, so does he have a prophet? He has a prophet, but we don't see
Yeah.
a bless. I mean, we don't see blessed like sacred units, no givers.
No.
So we've got
So
magic
he'd
weapons.
mentioned- Yeah, he'd mentioned he's running scales Drain Gath, which is interesting to me because my perception of Gath, like I'd explained in the last
Right.
episode, is that if you run Drain Gath, you run it because you're running a bless. And this is a bless. It's just not as big as
Yeah.
I would have.
So you're going to be scary with this, but you can also see like the Undying. That seems mostly for, like, I don't think we're going to see a lot of gibbers. This looks like it's going to be for. Well, actually, I don't know.
Yeah.
The resistances are way better on the gibbers than they are on the humans, but the strength, I don't know.
No, the resistances I think are for the little guys.
Okay.
If they hit a fire shield or foul vapors or whatever. The Gibberium, they have enough hit points to actually tank a hit.
Yeah, but I just mean like there's these guys. The little guys don't really have good enough stats that they're worth protecting. Like this has no attack,
The Undying,
no defense.
yeah,
All it is 4 strength. That's the only stat in here.
yeah. No, I'd actually mentioned this last episode that I think that if you play Drain Gath, you do want to take more stats.
Right.
That said, the Undying is incidental. +4 Undying is 2 death.
Right.
So he basically has that just because those are leftover death points from,
Right.
I would assume, Spirit Sight. And you can see the Undead Leadership there, which is actually extremely valuable on Gath. It might actually not be. Can you check if they have Spirit Sight on the Prophet there?
Yeah.
It might, because it might just be the
No.
Oh no, okay, yeah, it's just the Undead Leadership then,
Yeah,
which
okay.
is actually very valuable because they don't have great Undead Leadership on their priest guys.
Right. I mean, they do have some death mages, so
Yeah, they have some deaths they can summon Mound King, but it's when you're running like a small gang of Seer
Right.
or some Gibbers, then like you want that demon leadership on the priests to bless the Seer.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to Utgard. I'm trying to keep us.
Yeah, this is the one that I actually didn't like.
Yeah, this is probably
Or
the
this is
one you like
another
the
one that I
least,
didn't like.
I would say. And this is from
Yeah, I
Sleeker,
definitely
right?
expressed. Yeah, I expressed more distaste towards Mictlan's than I did this one. But I think I put it. I think I already said this in the last episode, but this is kind of a neither nor build where you're not running a build that allows you to focus on the Garm herds and like use them as your early carry in order to snowball.
Yeah.
And it's not a build that prioritizes scales and lets you like ignore the Garm herds and use your like just actually really good troops.
Ooh,
So
this is lucky too. They got an iron mine in their first province. Normally doesn't matter, but as your first province you expand to, it's actually clutch. It means they're going to be able to max Garms if they weren't already.
yeah. And so some interesting stuff about the scales, or I guess this isn't super interesting, but like just as like a minor thing, Utgard really wants Magic 3. So it has incredibly efficient mages in the Scythe Gunner,
Right.
and it has extremely valuable scaling in their magic because there are just you basically
Yeah.
just constantly get value out of your research. You get value out of your very first research goals. You get value out of
Yeah.
late game research because you can use so many different battlefield spells. And these guys are already very
Yeah.
efficient
These
at
guys
85
are
gold for
widely
11
considered
RP.
one of the most efficient mages in the game. Like in an All Stars draft, they're usually gone in the first round. They're really fucking good.
Yeah, so with that in mind, they also can't easily produce boosters. So because they have no
Mhm.
native fire or air magic,
Mhm.
there's fewer indie mages because it's LA, and the death booster isn't super efficient,
Right.
and you also need your death gems in general because you want to be spamming reanimation on this nation or pale riders in order to get your undead chaff for your bodyguarding
Right.
duties. So this is a nation that like can't really boost its research via items. So the extra RP that you get from your magic is very valuable. So the fact that they got Magic 3, regardless of your build, that's something you want to aim for. Unless you're like fully all in on like just killing people with Garm herds and like
Right.
you're just absolutely dedicating everything to that massive bless.
Right. One of the things to mention too about the bless. So it's shock 15 regen. Now, Garms built in have a shock malice. So, it helps with that. And -5 chakras is a pretty big penalty to be carried around with you. If, like swarms of air elementals come out or something, you're in big trouble. Like even baby air elementals will tear you up if you have 5 shock malice. So,
Yeah, you're just unlocked.
yeah. And the region, there's something Arco's been looking at the turns and he sends me little notes and stuff. But some of the math to consider is like you're going to be getting 4 hit points a turn from regen, 10% regen. When you're in melee, if like 3 guys are hitting you, like Stygian Skin or Fortitude or Hard Skin, these guys actually have pretty high base natural protection. Those are all going to give you more effective regen a turn, like more hit point mitigation a turn. Because things are going to be getting past 12, or once they berserk, let's see if we can find somebody who's berserked here. 14 protection, like things are going to get past that very regularly, like, well, 2. So, yeah, okay. This one hasn't got it.
These are some of the easier indies. We'll definitely get lots of examples of seeing
It's
these
like
guys take lots of damage.
these were probably in the same turn or in turns back to back. But like, even if it's just 8, if you take 5 points off of it with protection, that's more effective hit points than if you have regen. The difference, of course, with
I think
regen
it would
is
be 4 because that's piercing.
yeah.
Yeah.
The difference, of course, is with regen, if you have like, if you're not constantly engaged in combat, well, your protection isn't doing anything for you while your regen may catch you back up. But
I'm guessing that the regen is really for making even bigger turbo coms.
yeah,
Like, I don't think this
the
regen is purely
regen
for
pays
these guys.
itself off in very long battles. Like if these guys are intermixed with skeletons and it's a very long battle, which I think is long battles, I think is something in general mid-game Utgard really wants. And if you have these guys mixed
Yeah,
in,
but
that regen can add a lot more value over very long battles. But it's kind of, I don't know, it's tricky having them not die with any other protection buffs.
Yeah, my take on that is that if you get those ideal super long battles, then you're kind of winning anyways.
Yeah, probably. That's a good point. But so this is the starting army plus 5 Garms. So it's not a full
And
Garm
it's taking on a
expansion.
very weak province,
Right.
is worth pointing out.
It's what?
It's taking a fairly weak province.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
in terms of province size. Like I guess crossbows are like something that you can consider,
But
but
it's
that's
small.
like 25 units in LA is very
Yeah.
small enemy force.
So we'll see what they do, but they've got, I think when you're doing this, I don't think he's going to do a double expand next turn. I think he's going to wait and get another group. You're probably going to need I think 10 with just the region bless is the minimum. You probably want more like 12 per party. So it's probably not an expansion party every turn. It's probably like once you get going, it's like one every other turn. Or not every other, it's like
Honestly,
2 every 3 turns, is I think what it is. If you have 9
with
Dominion.
this small of a bless, I don't even know if I would make the Garms anyways for expansion, just because Utgard's regular units are so good. Like, you
Yeah.
can just make
And
the
he should
Javelinists.
look probably too at mixing them in because having like these guys mixed in to just soak up a third of the hits, like it's,
Well, those guys are 22 resources for size 2.
yeah, okay.
So, like, that's yeah, but
Any of the, yeah, I mean, some of the other guys, I was just thinking because their
the
job
hu
isn't to kill things, their job is just to not die.
yeah, the humans in general are I guess
Guys,
they do have a very low rec point cost because 'cause they're only 9
right?
RP, but as a result of that, their, like, ratio of, like, resources to rec points is very high even for the smaller guys.
Yeah. The other option I
Like, if
think
you
this
look at
actually is probably what it's tricky to do. It actually would be interesting. Oh, does he have? It'd be interesting to take a bless where you have some undead leadership. So that for expansion, you could have a priest carry out some long dead to mix in, but
yeah?
be tough to fit in. Obviously, it wouldn't fit on this
Yeah,
bless.
not with this build. I mean, you could send out a Scythe Kona
Yeah,
and do it that way. But yeah, I think Utgard actually benefits a lot from the early Long Dead, in part because it actually still gets the giant Long Dead,
right. Yeah, that's true.
which are amazingly efficient.
Yeah,
Like, those guys are,
they're really good,
like
and they've got great siege strength too. So this is Vedheim. He's got these light infantry here, or Vedi spearmen. This is a little better than light infantry.
that's just the starting army, I think.
Yeah, and then he's got some wolf. Are these wolf riders or wolf brothers? Wolf brothers, which I
Brothers,
believe
yeah.
have slightly better stats.
Yeah, you mostly get those guys for the defense.
Right. I like that he's got them on attack closest, not attack rear, especially in this configuration. Sometimes you can snipe the leader if they're on their own. But when I've tested Wolf Brother expansion, I have the worst luck sniping leaders. I just rather run them into the front.
Yeah, tend to put them on attack archers.
Okay.
And that usually also becomes a leader snipe, depending on, like, the way the indies are set up.
I need to experiment
Like,
with
especially with those
attack
cross
archer more. You've mentioned it a couple times.
Yeah, it's how you use the Evil Warriors as
Yeah.
well.
Okay, so it looks like they won the Mercs. That'd be excellent for Vedheim.
Yeah, Vedheim naturally has really good expansion regardless of what build you take.
Yeah.
Like, there are, like, 4 or 5 different ways to expand with Vedheim. It's an extremely flexible nation
Right.
in terms of the troop setup.
Yeah.
It's one of those nations where, like, even the troops that you don't recruit because you have better options still aren't bad. Like, if you look at just, like, the Vede Spearmen, for instance,
Right.
those guys are really solid units. You just have even better units, so you don't, like, tend to get
Right.
them.
Yeah, he's the spearman. Yeah, they're pretty solid. Yeah, I think there's
Yeah, right?
it's a new
6
nation
per
too,
square,
so
and
things haven't been super explored. But like these crossbowmen, freaking amazing too.
I don't know if you can call it a new nation when it's been out for, like, years at this point. But yeah, the
It's
biggest
the
thing
last
that
nation
people
they got
love
added, right?
love You might be right, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's new, except by the standards of, like, nations that have been out since, like, Dominions
Yeah.
1.
Okay.
But, like, yeah, no, people love the crossbows because, size 1 crossbows, awesome. And they're stealthy, so also awesome.
Yeah.
In fact, the ubiquitous stealth is one of the best things about Vedheim. But then you've also got the herdmen, which are just, like, incredibly tanky size 1 infantry. But you've got the berserkers, which hit really hard and also still have 6 attacks per square. The herdmen are to the left of those guys, the herd
yeah.
Vedi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, 15 protection doesn't sound that impressive, but then you realize that they're sharing attacks with 5 other dudes.
Yeah. They're solid.
Yeah, and then, of course, the Wolf Brothers, which we're seeing for expansion here, very good as far as, like, a small number unit goes, just because they're cavalry, so they have that defensive bonus in terms of, like, not having their defense reduced, and just an even higher base defense, so they start at 16.
I just love the Berserker, man. I'm all in on the Berserker. I think it's one of the best units in the game.
Oh, yeah, no, they're incredible. If you don't run into elementals with these guys, they'll have a great time.
Yeah. Okay.
Personally, I like the Sacres, actually. That's my favorite Veda unit.
Yeah, they're pretty good. But
Magic weapons, stacking auras, lots to love about these guys.
it's true. It's true.
And all these units that we're praising, we've been talking about, like, I think 5 different units just now.
Yeah. Daddy's really
And they're not
flexible.
all viable. Yeah, they're not all viable expansion strategies, mind. You probably shouldn't try to expand with the Berserkers.
Right. I've
But
done it actually.
very
There's
impressive
a
roster.
they actually expand really well.
Really?
But you don't do them by themselves. You do them. You
Mm,
pair them with
with-
these guys,
yeah.
and these guys take 2/3 of the hits, but they're not killy enough, so they don't actually expand very well on their own. And when you pair them with
I
some of these guys, they're not very killy when there's just two of them in a tile with these dudes. But when you put two berserkers in there with these guys, you basically have three like 20 plus damage attacks around. And these guys are going to dodge 2/3 of the attacks because this guy's going to take them. It's a pretty,
oh, that's
it's a
interesting.
pretty good combo.
I know that Jotun Spearmen, like both in MA for Jotunheim and here for Utgard, expand very well. But I
Yeah.
haven't actually used the Axemen just because of the low length of their weapon.
Right. Yeah, they don't kill that much on their own. Their job is just take up 2/3 of the hits, and they don't die.
Hmm.
And then you put two berserkers in there with them, and those berserkers are going to blender things, and they can take a shot or two. You know, they've got 13 protection, but
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't actually tried that.
Yeah. I did.
Oh,
I did
and
a
then the
bunch
moose
of
are also really
expansion
good.
testing for
The
my game.
moose,
That was the best thing I could figure out. But like you said, there's so many good units.
yeah, the best that I've done when I played them into Disciples and I couldn't take a particularly good Bless was with the Wolf Brothers.
Yeah,
And when I did my own Bless that I actually expanded just with the Sacres, even in summer.
yeah.
The Wolf guys are also interesting because they're one of the best recruitable Evo bait units.
The wolf.
The
Oh,
Moose.
the moose. Yeah, yeah. I've seen that. Arco has like a little video he published of it. It's pretty funny. Okay, so let's move on to the next column. We've got Midgard here, and so this is the Viking-themed elf nation of Midgard. And we were wondering kind of what their build was, and it looks like they ran, and basically this is a pretty lock, stock, standard elf build.
Kind of. It's very light in terms of its Bless.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is more designed, when I say an elf build, like this is more designed for thugs, is how I look at this.
This is a scales build, my dude. That's how I see it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the bless is not, the bless is oriented towards making thugs good. Like these bands are not gonna win you wars, I don't think, with this bless. Like it's
Mm.
not really gonna be amazing on them. But
So the
you're
reason
covering a lot of
I honestly just
bases.
think this is yeah. So I do see this as like a very light Bless. The reason that I don't see this as a thug Bless
Yeah.
is that the things that define a thug Bless to me are things like reinvigoration and regeneration, like things that like a solo combatant would want in an extended fight. Because in general, thugs tend to be like things that can survive really well rather than things that just kill very quickly. So when I see strength on a build, for example, or undying on a build, that's telling me it's for the troops, not the thug.
Yeah. Well, when I said elf bless, I mean there's a kind of, I don't know the exact name, but a lot of elf nations that are gonna, like, when I see somebody with the bless like this, I know they want a thug, right? But it's kind of like incidentally they're gonna use it on their troops. I don't know. Just mark my words. There's gonna be a lot of elf thugs running around.
I mean, yeah. So I definitely do think that Midgard is going to build thugs because like that's what their capital makes,
Right.
right? Like all their other good mages are everywhere. I just see this and think that their bless is incidental and that the real focus is like
No, you think it's the
we
magic
want the
bats.
scales.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, the Air Four in particular is saying that to me because, you already do have air magic in your nation, right?
Right.
So, like, if you're taking Air Four for that extra shock resistance, and given that your mages aren't sacred, it doesn't really protect your nation against Wrathful Skies,
Mhm.
then, like, they just wanted that Air Four path.
Okay. A successful expansion. And we have Pangea here. Now, we were talking last time about using these Dryad hoplites. These are the sacreds. Using them with a very, very light bless.
Yeah, these guys do not need a bless.
And here they've got Undying Aid, which is a very odd pickup, and magic weapons.
No, this is incidental to the paths once
Right.
again. So this guy has taken a Idol of Sorcery.
Right. That's correct.
I mean, we don't see it yet, but like looking at those paths, you just know
Yeah.
that's what he's doing. But this is
Well-
like a full scales
Well,
build.
let's take a look at it again. Do they
And-
have Spirit Sight? Yeah.
Yep.
So it's Death 5. Oh, no, 6.
That's 6. Yeah.
Death 6, and then Astral 5. Oh,
Astral 6
Astral
as well
6.
for the spirit
Death
side.
6, Astral
Yeah.
6. Okay.
This is a Soul Drain caster.
Yep.
And, also like other stuff. How many misc slots does that have? Because it might also be a Wish caster.
It only has 2, I think. There's no way it has 3.
Okay, well, never mind. Not a wish caster then.
Yeah. But the big
But
pricey
I
power
mean,
it can be.
also true, yeah. And it can definitely forge Rings of Sorcery, so it's got that going for it, which is nice. But yeah, this is a like full skills Pangea, which I definitely approve of. This is like actually the very similar to a build that I ran.
Yeah.
I went even harder into scales because I was also in a smaller game. But like Idle Sorcery is very high impact, really good late game caster, fun to drop on people too. And then
Those are really good scales for having such a strong pretender. I mean, that's
yeah,
yeah.
one of my favorite things about the Idol of Sorcery is that because it is, basically just a rock that casts good spells, if it gets like a ton of afflictions and dies and you call it back, you don't care, right? Like as long as it's not feeble-minded or like what's the one that sets it to half that gives you dementia?
Oh, mute.
Mute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like as long as you don't get either of those two, like you're happy.
Right.
And even with mute, I think this guy could still cast like, S3, Death 3. You can do some stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is like a build that's like as much scales as you want, and then while keeping those scales, I'm guessing he's not valuing order as highly, which can actually become a factor for recruitment outside of your cap.
Right.
But
But they have
that said,
really
like this is
heavily.
still-
I mean, I thought their good stuff is really resource intensive, right? Like these guys.
it is,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's also 21 recruitment points, right? Like it's not
It's true.
9. Yeah. Like he's going to be able to max those guys out of like farms just because those also have a resource malice. And then of course he's going to be able to get lots of them out of his cap. But as the game goes on, there's going to be like some recruitment point limitation with this build. But that it's almost full scales.
Right.
And then he gets this really incredible super combatant guy while still being able to afford all those scales.
Yeah. That looks really solid to me. To keep us moving, we've got Marignon up next. Now, Marignon can do a bunch of things. We were talking, they can do the crossbows. They can do the Royal Guard expansion. Here they've got City Guard in the front, crossbows in the back. I can't remember the starting army. It looks like they added
Their
City
starting
Guard
army
to
is
it.
Their starting army is one of the worst starting armies in the game, unless you've buffed it in one of the mods that they're using
No.
here.
We haven't.
Yeah, so city guards are garbage. Those guys are like militia.
Right.
Yeah, 9 morale, 8 attack, 9 defense.
Yeah. The real
High
tragedy here is the
damage.
attack on the glaive. Right. It's
7 attack.
yeah.
Yeah.
They hit really hard. You can earth melt something, they're a decent value. But
Yeah, but those guys are basically militia. And then you've got the crossbows, which is like that's what really carries you.
right.
So I like Hellblessed Marignon. That's my favorite way to play. But
all right. Yeah, you mentioned
I
the
don't think that's
flagellants.
normal. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's like the standard. And I think that like the generally understood way to play Marignon leans very heavily on their magic because
Right.
they do have really good magic options. And because this guy's taken in a weak pretender, he's going to hit those magic options very quickly. So depending on what he goes for, he might do some kind of like point buff strategy
Right.
where he like sends wizards out with his troops to go buff them for expansion.
Right.
He might even just do very
And-
early elementals.
Yeah, it's one of the cool things about late age too, because you have a lot of citadels. It makes kind of weird little mage strats like that, 50% more possible. You're going to have a lot more mages sitting around.
Yeah, and I'm a
And
big
he
fan
made
of
crossbows this turn, so I'm expecting he's going to reinforce this army, and he's probably going to go full crossbow. Is what it looks like.
Yeah, and Regicor is a big fan of this, I think.
Yeah, there
Not
major
Lola,
fucking
as
problems
what
with
he goes
doing
by
that
now.
though, which is heavy cav.
Um,
Heavy cav just fucking crush crossbows. Like it just
Kind of. So if you set up like different disparate squads of crossbows, you can actually get a lot of mileage out of literally just a crossbow army.
yeah. Yeah, that would be cool
It's
to
not
see.
quite-
I haven't really, I did that somewhat in the Bogarus game, but
Yeah, and you were using Smite Mages for that,
Yeah.
which, very impressive to see. I really enjoyed that battle. But if you're using like crossbows as your damage source, then you can still use like these spread out groups and get a very similar effect going.
right.
Where just, these mini blobs of these armor piercing shots are accomplishing the same effect.
Yeah. What would be a cool Marignon build? It's like Blood Vengeance Flagellants. And just that's the only thing.
I've seen it. I also saw Blood Vengeance by Flame Explosion,
Yeah.
which was not very good.
But the Flame
But
Explosion,
funny.
yeah, tends to be a powder keg, but
Yeah, I don't think that Blood Vengeance is really the way to go.
Yeah.
In part just because you have some of the most effective evocation in the game on this nation.
right. You blow up your own dudes.
Like you have all the clouds. You've
just,
got Sulfur Haze, Freezing Mist.
I don't know. I haven't tested this myself, but I just because here's what I know. Here's my data point. My data point's playing late age Ulm a decent amount. And because there you can do, I'm a big fan of Ranger expansion. There's a lot of ways to do it, but you kind of do need some wolves. Like you definitely need wolves for the cav, but you kind of need wolves even for the normal things too, a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's much well, okay, so Rangers are a little more expensive,
Right.
and they also are a little bit more resource intensive. You can get some more crossbows compared to your
Right.
Rangers, but you're right that, like, having some kind of blocker helps a lot, and if you're using crossbows as your blockers, which is, like, kind of the idea of the crossbow-only Marignon
Right.
expansion, you're gonna bleed them, right? Like, you aren't taking provinces without
Right.
losing some of your
Yeah.
guys.
And I mean, once you get 60 or 70 crossbows, like you'll be taking lossless things. You'll just route them before they get to you. But that's not really expansion anymore. Like you can't get 60.
Right.
It's just the math I don't think works. That'd be like
Yeah,
every
the way
3
that
turns or
you
something.
when you're doing the, like, crossbow, like, lore thing where you're, like, intentionally sacrificing some of your squads,
Yeah.
like, you basically are bleeding some every fight, but the advantage that they have over wolves is that they at least stand still,
Yeah, that's true.
whereas the wolves are always gonna run in and die.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely not lossless
Yeah.
expansion.
All right. Coming up to Agartha. Looks like we're going to have to break this video up into 2 as well. But that makes sense. We're talking about builds a lot.
Yeah, so Agartha is another one where because we don't see the bless, or rather we see that they have literally no bless, there's only a couple things that this can be. So I think I speculated last time that it's most likely Imprisoned Incarnate, but there's a couple other things it could be. It could also be some kind of imprisoned build that casts a couple spells that are just like that it's at a low enough level that it doesn't have literally any bless whatsoever. Or it could be something
It should
where
be a Titan,
uh
too.
yeah, something with like low paths,
Yeah.
a budget chassis of some
Because that's
kind.
one thing Agartha
And
kind of needs. Agartha kind of needs Magic Phase. Like, it doesn't get it, really. Like, you can do a Rouse Hunger, maybe. Can't really think of much else you could do in the Magic Phase. So, being able to
yeah,
drop a Titan on somebody be super high value.
Agartha needs, in my opinion, a lot of things.
Yeah.
But they need poison resistance. For example, like the ability to cast poison
Well, we
resistance
can
on their
we can
guys.
rule
push
that
them-
out.
Yeah, they not. I didn't mean it in their bless. Actually,
Oh,
I just
as a
meant like
caster.
they need. Yeah, that they need to get that somehow.
Yeah.
They just die to foul vapors.
Sure.
Because you can't Skella spam if the other guy casts spell vapors, because then like your goal is to drag the fight late, and then
Do these trolls I forget what kind of mages or what kind of recruits do you get from this?
I don't think you actually get forest trolls as a pop type. It's only the regular trolls that have like the special pop type.
Okay,
Forest
okay.
trolls are just like a province thing. I think that you get like one of the boring druid province types, or one of the like the regular guys.
Some crystal
that's
Amazon.
very
These are going to be
interesting.
amazing for Utgard.
Oh yeah, if Utgard can get those, that's a major game changer.
Yeah. Nice
Because
for
like you
Agartha
already
too,
have
but-
because you already have the ubiquitous astral, but lacking both air and earth means that you don't tend to have like amazing physical answers.
Right.
And air in particular is incredible on Utgard.
Yeah. Like a turn 5 mass flight after you've been slamming skeletons for a long time. Surprise.
Yeah, or even just or because they have turbo comps, they actually also don't care about the path combination stuff.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah.
you can put in air. Yeah, well, I mean, I was thinking air elementals or fog warriors, like
Yeah.
anything that you want to communion up to cast. Like you don't care that they're casting off
Yeah,
path
that's a good
magic
point.
because all of your magic's off path anyways. Yeah.
Okay. So that's Agartha. Seem to be expanding well. And sadly, they've kind of ruined a lot of the reason for which like Marignon would want this lake. You want the lake so you can sail around and get cool shit. Well, I mean, I guess they could sail over this way, but they're not sailing towards Agartha's cap circle, and there's a very good chance Agartha is going to contest one of these.
Given that Aaron is like a very Diplo heavy player, he's probably worked out borders as well.
Yeah, we don't see a message from him, so we'll see. And that brings us back to the elves. We're getting close to an hour. Let's go ahead and cut it here, Sai, and we'll do the next 2 columns in the next episode.
Did we miss people?
We have 2 columns left to do, so we've done half the players.
If you say that we didn't get back to that we didn't get to everyone, then yeah, I believe
Yeah.
you.
We've got to do all these people. All
We still got Pythium and stuff. Okay.
Arethia.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
All right, guys.
I was like, that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys next
See you.
time.